If you're in the B2B space or run an agency, this actually might be one of the most valuable videos you see all month. I wrote one cold email and that pulled in 7 figures for one of my clients. Tim, here's some proof before we jump into everything. 57 calls in 1 week. In total, it was actually about 1.3, $1.4 million closed and around 1,000 calls booked as well. And in just 30 days or best month, we booked in $247,000 in revenue. So how do we even do that? It all boils down to killer copywriting. We were in an incredibly, one of the most saturated niches, and killer copywriting is how we stood out. We broke a bunch of rules as well. First, let's define what copywriting truly is. A lot of people totally misunderstand this, and it's the fundamental starting point. You have to understand what copywriting is. Copywriting happens when you want someone to do something, and when you're saying something or you're writing something. It's the message that you're conveying to someone. This video is copy. Your cold email is copy. If you're talking to, if you have an appointment setter in your business or you are an appointment setter, the messages to these prospects, copy. The Loom videos, if you're sending them on outreach, copy. Every single thing that you do is copy if there's a message involved, essentially. Sales process, copy. When I was working with Tim, we zeroed in on cold email. The reason for that is because that's where his audience was hanging out. But the principles I'm about to go through and you're about to learn work pretty much everywhere. And before anything, I want you to think of copy as the engine of your outreach. You can have the most beautiful car on the planet, but without a powerful engine, you're essentially going to go nowhere. Now, it's the same with outreach. Killer copy can really make you stand out in a saturated niche. The most important thing is going to be supply demand. Who are you selling to? What's the competition like? And what are you selling them? Essentially, what is the problem that you're solving? And is it too saturated? That's really important, supply and demand. But again, killer copy can help you stand out in a saturated niche. And we made 247K in 30 days, 1.3, 1.4 million in total, 1,000 calls for Tim's agency. And that was in a saturated niche. Why? Because of killer copy. So a lot of people like to blindly follow the best practices, the proven templates, without ever testing if they actually work or if it's just essentially not true and just a best practice for beginners. And you might be doing that too, but it's actually important to look into that because for Tim's campaign, I literally broke 3 email copywriting rules. And this is important. I didn't break them to be a rebel or to look cool. I broke them because I tested them first. I had an idea, I tested it, or I saw something in the data, looked into it, and then came up with a conclusion of why the data is behaving that way, tested a new idea, and then I saw the data improve and calls went up. One of the first rules that I broke is I put links in the first email. Everybody else really didn't question it at the time. They just thought, don't put links in your cold email, you'll go to the spam folder. I did that and our calls skyrocketed. I put it to the test, looked at the data, and it was way better than not having them in the cold email. And this lasted for about a year. So it makes sense if you think about it. Adding a link eliminates friction and makes it easier for someone to actually book in a call. Because if you're getting a positive reply, then you send a link, there's an extra step in your funnel, and it's going to be harder to get them to go through the funnel because, again, there's an extra step. So the second rule that I broke is keeping your emails short and simple, or even a medium length. The emails that we wrote were incredibly long, 4 big paragraphs. And look, this is actually probably the most common advice you'll hear. Nobody reads long emails. Keep it under 3 sentences, 4 sentences, 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 if they're very short, 1 sentence each. Get to the point, etc. But ours were 4 massive paragraphs. Look, I put it to the test and I tested shorter emails, super short emails, 1, 2 sentences, medium emails. And then what worked for me is the insanely long emails. And guess what won for us? The long emails. I have a couple ideas in my mind of why. I think one of it is that there was literally no fluff. It was a very long email with no fluff. And it was a sales argument where we were also educating the prospect on why they should even listen to this service and read this email and book a call, essentially. So there was a lot of selling in it. And it wasn't really like a traditional cold email with straight to the point, but it wasn't also like an ad. So it was somewhere sort of in between, I would say. And also, it was a bit of a pattern interruption because they were used to short emails and we sent something that was a lot longer. So for paragraph 1, we asked them if they're doing what we're about to pitch them on already, sort of saying like, have you been thinking about getting this service already? Because a lot of them at the time didn't do this service. It was a new service. Number 2, we explained why they should be thinking of it if they haven't been already and how it would help them. For number 3, we continued to persuade, write out our sales argument, essentially different angles, deeply understanding our avatars, I've mentioned, speaking their language and explaining why they should actually pay attention, and also hitting on some case studies as big as possible, the biggest ones we could find from our client. And then paragraph 4, again, it's just more persuading, it's benefits, it's sales arguments. And then we went to one clear, low friction call to action, booking a call, and here is the link. Look, it took a lot more time to write that script than it did shorter scripts. However, putting in more effort here worked massively, and putting in the effort to test these 3 rules that I broke also helped as well. So the next one that I broke, which had a huge impact, is always send follow-ups. And I decided, no, let me test this, put it to the test, and the results sort of surprised me, to be honest with you. Essentially, every cold email expert, especially at the time, was preaching that follow-ups are where the magic happens. Money in the follow-up, do 7 follow-ups, and it's practically gospel. But for weeks, I saw this really weird pattern, and it was in the back of my mind. We'd get 12 calls on one day, and then the next day we get 2 to 3, and then we get 12 calls, and then 2 to 3, and then 12 and 2 to 3. This happened for weeks, and I was confused. I looked into the numbers, and guess what I found? Our automated follow-ups were going out on the low performing days. So day 1 with 12 calls, completely cold prospects. Day 2, follow-ups for the previous day. So I killed all of the follow-ups, which was very unusual for the time. Completely turned them off, and boom, we started booking 12 calls consistently every single day. I just saw them coming into the Slack channel. And this kept up, like I said, for almost a year. And looking back, it's because our initial email was so strong that, especially in this industry, they know the game. It's a sophisticated, saturated market. They didn't need follow-ups to book in. Now, look, I'm not saying follow-ups never work. Absolutely not. Most of the time, 80% of your calls will come from most niches in your first email. So therefore, why would you spend so much of your resources? You can send 10,000, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, whatever, emails per month. Why would you send follow-ups if you can find a big enough email list for your TAM, for your niche, total addressable market? Then focus on that instead. So the key here, and sending initial emails, the key here is don't blindly follow the herd. And when I say this, think for yourself as much as possible, but you're always going to be following the herd to some degree, including your own subconscious plans and strategies and feelings and fears. But again, you try your best to stand out, you try your best to do your best, and you try your best to be smart, and you try your best to think for yourself, even though that can actually be difficult, because again, we're all humans, we're all affected, we're all being brainwashed every single second. The final piece is essentially a bonus principle: make a strategy that can't fail. So this is actually probably one of the most important business principles I've ever learned. And essentially what I did is I asked myself, what would make it completely unreasonable for me not to hit the goal I had in my mind? I wanted the calendars to be packed. I wanted hundreds and hundreds of calls every single month, and that's what we got. The reason this works is because you ask yourself, what approach is so powerful, so different, that it's guaranteed to succeed? If your confidence level is usually, and for a lot of entrepreneurs and agency owners, it is very high. We believe in ourselves, we believe in our strategies, but let's say you fully believe in yourself. I want you to get to a place where you're like, there's no way this won't work. Alien invasion could happen, whatever, I don't care. Anything could happen. It's going to work double. So you fully believe in yourself. Now it's like, yeah, I mean, listen, I could do half of the strategy and it'll still make me millions of dollars. I need you to be incredibly confident, way more than usual. For this campaign specifically, it meant a few things. Crazy high volume. Everyone else was sending 5 to 10,000 emails at the time, and we sent 200,000 emails per month. Number 2, even with a lower conversion rate, the sheer volume of quality prospects meant that we couldn't fail to book meetings. And that was essentially the magic. We're sending so much that there's no way the strategy could fail. And number 3, finding enough leads. Most people didn't have enough leads and didn't know how to get enough leads to do this type of volume. So I found out how. I made it my business. I pretended it was my job. Find enough leads. I need 200,000 leads. Where am I going to get them? And I figured it out. Plus, of course, everything I said before, the 3 rules that I broke. Combine these 4 or 5 things together, that's where the magic can happen. And this is what I mean by a strategy that can't fail. It's not about being 100% sure about one approach. It's about building a strategy of multiple different paths to success, outreach, content, whatever it is, high volume email, social media outreach, a referral system, etc., etc. So the plan is so ridiculous with such huge scale. It's so untapped. No one else is doing this kind of strategy that you have, that it makes it hard to fail. Before I end the video, let's circle back to those numbers. 57 calls in a week, $1.3 to $1.4 million in closed deals, and our best month, $247,000 in revenue. That's the power of good copywriting strategically applied to cold outreach. And the good news is that you can actually do this yourself. These principles can work for any B2B business, any agency, when the right checkboxes are aligned. So if you're struggling with your outreach, I bet good money that you're following some of the best practices that everybody says without testing if they actually work for your situation. My advice, try breaking some of the rules. Seriously, test the opposite of what everyone tells you. If everyone's following a rule, even if it's a good rule, if you do the opposite, you're immediately going to stand out. You might be shocked by what you find. Because at the end of the day, effective copywriting is about understanding your audience so deeply that you can speak directly to their needs in a way that feels personal and compelling that they have no choice but to read your email and take the next action. And that's essentially how we created one script that generated 7 figures for Tim.